right. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Grant Norling, co-founder and VP of Client Experience here at Valcre. I've been in the shoes of many of you joining us today and our panelists with more than 25 years as an appraiser and 15 years helping drive efficiencies through appraisal technology. Thanks for joining us for the first session of the Opinions of Value Live. This is a practitioner-led conversation series on the issues shaping commercial real estate appraisal. Throughout the series, we will dive into a variety of practice-driven topics such as litigation, expert witness, and the appraiser in the courtroom, AI technology in appraisal, what's hype versus reality, mastering complex asset types, the lender's perspective, what banks really want from an appraisal, along with many other interesting discussions. Today, we're starting where everything starts, the state of the profession. I'm joined by five people who have been doing this work long enough to have real perspective on where we are today and where we're heading. Let me introduce the panel quickly. Rodman Schley, founder, Commercial Valuation Advisors. Jacinto Munoz, founder, Cogito Realty Partners. Walter Krzyzwicki, WSFS Bank. Scott Tu, founder, Valtrust. And finally, Patrick Walsh, Director of Information Technology, formerly with BBG. Before we really open things up, I want to do just a quick round with the panel here. Just one word or short phrase. How would you describe where the appraisal industry is right now? Don't elaborate, just the word. Rodman, let's start with you.
Evolving.
Jacinto.
Reinvented.
Walt.
Transitional.
Scott, how about you?
Automating.
And Patrick.
Preparing.
Well, it feels like there's a fair amount of optimism here. So let's get into the questions and see how the state of the market really is. So transaction volume has been compressed for a while now. Are you seeing any meaningful shift in deal activity or appraisal order volume? And does it feel different depending on what asset type or what region you're in? Rodman, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, so I'm in the Colorado area, and I've seen actually some upticks in volume lately, which has been great. I know that we were pretty flat for quite a while. Matter of fact, we were probably declining, compressing, like you were saying. And I don't have really good statistics on that because you know what? I'm an appraiser. I see what comes across my desk, but I don't see what's coming into the banking systems, into the places that are actually awarding the work. So for me, it was very visceral to say, yes, I feel like we're moving in the right direction. But off camera before, Walt and I were talking a little bit, and he was looking at some statistics that say, yeah, he is seeing it statistically that we're also moving in the right direction. You can only have that pent-up demand for so long. We've had these high interest rates for a while. By the way, calling them high interest rates is a total injustice. I mean, I remember when we were 10 capping everything because everything was a 10% interest rate. So for us to call these interest rates, 6 to 7% being high, it's kind of a disservice. But at the same time, people have been holding off because I feel like they've been waiting for that opportunity to get that refinance when we get those dips. Now, when things are kind of doing what they're doing right now, kind of a more of a leveling than a going up or a going down right now, I kind of feel like some people are kind of moving off the sidelines. But I feel like when things start to tick down just a little bit more, we're going to see kind of an influx of these people who have been on the fence start really coming out to play.
Walter, you see a lot of things on the banking side. How are things going in your world?
Yeah, no, to piggyback off of Rodman, I think that things are improving. I think they're going really well. Obviously, as the rates increased from their all-time lows, we naturally saw a decrease in the amount of new loans that were being written. But however, now, with the initial like shock effect is worn off, and now we're starting to see that the markets have kind of accepted, what's now the new normal. After a period, I would kind of call it like a sales stagnation. We're actually starting to see an increase in sales transactions, which is great because hopefully that better supports cap rates if you actually have some sales that sell. But We've also noticed that there's some lenders that may have slowed down their loan volume when the rates were increasing. Now they're becoming more active. So one thing that we're seeing here is that deals are actually starting to become competitive again. It's not that you're the only lender in town. So that makes things obviously better for people who are borrowing money and who are getting back into the market. But obviously overall volume, I've noticed, like like Rodman said, I was running some numbers this morning, and it looks like we're probably a good 15-16% above where we were for the first half of this year when compared to the first half of last year. So it's always great to kind of have these conversations with other appraisers who are out there to kind of see what they're doing and to see if everybody's busy or if it's just them or if it's just us. So
Scott, what are you seeing with your firm?
Grant, I think you asked for me. I'm here in Florida, and we've definitely saw in 23, we saw transactions kind of slow way down when the interest rates went up and lending volume, followed suit. I think 24 was a repricing year, and everybody was kind of, the sellers and buyers were figuring things out. 25 definitely felt like we started to see things come back a little bit more, both on the transactional side and the lending side. And I feel like that's carrying through into 2026. Beyond that, like a lot of firms, in when things slowed down a few years ago, we kind of looked at other avenues outside of traditional lending work. And so that's been a good diversification move for us. So it's a little difficult to kind of pin down exactly what lending volumes or at least appraisal order volumes have done in the last 12 months. But I would say overall it's been positive, like the other members of the panel have echoed.
Jacinto, only a portion of your team really works on bank lending work. How's that been going for your firm?
Yeah, I mean, both of our teams are seemingly very busy, but one thing I'd like to really kind of distinguish, because, uh, as you guys know, I teach at the university, and one of the things I tell the students all the time about why I love being an appraiser is it just seems like we're busy when the market's hot. We're busy when the market's having a lot of foreclosure activity. We're busy. We seem to kind of slow down in these transitional markets, and this is probably kind of the longest transitional market I've seen where there's been a lot of ups and downs. And so when I'm thinking about this, I'd really like to distinguish more between activity and recovery, because those are two different things. And I'm seeing the first more than the second. And by that, what I mean, I'm saying there's a real meaningful share of what's coming in through our doors. As I said, my partner here, Russ Zellner in LA and Donald Lee in New York, they largely work in the financial institution space. But what I'm seeing come through the doors is more out of necessity. So things like maturities, refinancing, pressures for extensions, workouts, monitorings, situations where you have an existing valuation that simply is not like our typical cycles we normally see, where there's a lot of sales coming through the door mixed with refinances because people have to, you know, they're refinancing out of necessity more than have they done in previous cycles. So it's still real work, but it's not the same thing as total transaction volume returning. As you said, Grant, my own practice is very different from most because it's heavily litigation focused, eminent domain, ground lease arbitrations, and those types of things. And that work is counter cyclical most often. Uh, it's kind of, it has its peaks and booms as well. But because eminent domain tracks infrastructure spending, not capital markets, the projects were funded years ago, and so they don't care, whether what the 10 years doing. So it's very different. The rent reset work, I'd like to flag for this audience. I think this is a work that people are missing out on. Some of the eminent domain work is a little tougher to get in because You have to wait for, the municipalities to open their vendor panels. But this is work that, appraisers could be getting out in front of right now, doing market rent arbitrations. So I think the market is again working out of necessity, but I think we will see some return of transaction volume, uh, more typical transaction volume, probably within the next 12 to 24 months.
So I have a quick follow-up for Walter because Jacinto brought up an interesting point that, a lot of the lending work that they're doing is not for new deals. So pivoting back to your observation that velocity is up 16% year over year, is that, is it because more loans need workout and monitoring, or is this new businesses and new deals?
I
Yeah,
think that it's a combination of the two. I definitely agree with what Jacinto is saying that, you know, sales transaction and new incoming deals, new refinances, are making up a small portion of what it is. It's a growing portion, but it's still obviously far below what they were back when interest rates were 3.5%, 4%. That's going to be obvious. And lenders that have large portfolios, you're always naturally going to see a higher concentration of, loans in your portfolio that are going to come for renewal or maturity, when compared to new loans that are coming in the door. So, overall, we've remained proactive and always open to new opportunities and for new deals and to continue to look forward to new opportunities to service both our existing clients and also for new clients. However, yeah, we do see a large portion of loans that are needing to come due. And in either situation, the appraisal process remains arguably our most critical component in our collateral due diligence. One major change that I've noticed internally here is when the appraisal is being ordered. Whether it's a new loan, renewal, or monitoring, we're seeing appraisals being ordered earlier in the loan process. For sales, the appraisals are being used, or being ordered earlier in the process, and the market and property analysis plays a more important role in the overall risk assessment and the underwriting. For renewals and extensions, we're seeing that the appraisals are being ordered multiple months before maturity. And, a large portion of what our team now is doing is we're reconciling between an original appraisal that may have been performed, several years ago with the current valuation based on recent market, conditions. Another thing to consider is there's a lot of banks out there, including ours, that do a lot of construction financing. And we're seeing a need for increased follow-up services to determine how accurate some of the assumptions and forecasts that were made in the original appraisal were. Items such as the lease-up absorption, the realized effective rates, the expenses, the net operating income. How is what is currently being achieved compared to what an appraiser said 2, 3 years ago when the project was just on paper. Yeah, so overall, lending risk appetite, remains strong. But the strength of that really is impacted on the market and the property specific information that we receive in the appraisal reports, which is one of the reasons why we're seeing the appraisals being ordered earlier and, the increased importance on a credible and reliable analysis. And that's why selecting the right appraiser for the assignment is becoming more important. And, we talk about geographical competency and property specific competency all the time in our team and making sure that, that we're using the right practitioner.
I want to pivot to non-lending work for just a moment. Scott, you made a note that your business has been focused on trying to secure alternative work such as litigation, tax appeal, eminent domain, those sort of non-cyclical areas of practice. How is work volume for those areas going, and what sort of trends are you seeing?
The one we've probably seen the most demand in has been, as you might guess, the tax appeal space. We've managed to align with a couple of firms that do the appeals and like to have as kind of background information a full appraisal on file when they go in to make those appeals. And I'd say that business has been pretty robust. There's probably a quite a bit more out of it out there than even what we're seeing. We've got a handful of clients that kind of target certain asset types that have put us working on a lot of office. As you can imagine, I think there's been a lot of overvalued suburban and CBD office, particularly the multi-tenant stuff. So that's been a very robust space, I would say, over the past year or two. Litigation, as Jacinto mentioned, you don't just jump in overnight. Hey, I'm a litigation appraiser now. We've been kind of finding the right spots that myself or my team bring the right group of talents to that we can really offer something to the attorneys in whatever specific case type it is. So that's been a little slower, but I think that works out there as well. There's a healthy demand for appraisers that can prove a point, sit on the stand, do the back and forth if it comes to that, if it comes to actually going into the courtroom. So that's a little bit about where we've been having some success.
Jacinto, will you weigh on drill into this a little bit more, please?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Scott was saying. It's something that you don't just jump into. I mean, I've been lucky to have a lot of great mentors in the litigation space. Guys like Steve Roach, John Ellis, Scott Delahook. So helped me kind of make that transition. As because most of I mean, I spent a good 10 years on the banking side, and it wasn't until I left the banking side about 4 years ago when we started Cogito Realty Partners that we focused on the litigation, or that I focused on the litigation ranks. And that started, as Scott said, doing some tax appeal, some smaller market rent resets, arbitrations, and building into it. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to just jump into it and then get destroyed your first time out, because then your reputation is. You want to make sure that you're taking it, bite-sized chunks, working with attorneys who have experience, because sometimes you work with an attorney who's not very experienced, let's say in eminent domain, then there's certain procedural aspects of eminent domain and understanding for instance in California Code of Civil Procedure or evidence code. But I think that's the right way to go about it, is that trying to be very strategic in how you jump into that space, and making sure that you don't put yourself in a position where attorneys aren't going to trust you, because just like in every other part of appraisal, it comes down to the trust of your clients, public trust, and ensuring that you can provide a credible analysis. And that's why I said right now, what we're seeing more than ever, and speaking with industrial brokers and especially industrial, where there are a lot of market rent arbitrations that are coming through the pipeline, where you may have a rent reset or a ground lease that was set 20, 30 years ago, and now it's time for resetting it to market. And one appraiser's at 50 million and the other one's at 10 million, and now we have to bring in a third. This is an opportunity for people to kind of start playing in that space. But like everything else, you have to have the competency and ability to provide a credible analysis.
So, Patrick, I'm going to ask you a question, and related to the same topic in general. So, in your experience from the technology standpoint, what are the differences between supporting finance work compared to supporting some of these more specialized practice areas?
Yeah, thanks, Grant. So when we start looking at the technologies that we use to support these appraisals, and especially today, where I think everyone's answer was some form of transitioning as to where is this appraisal profession headed, the types of technology that we're using are going to change. And AI is going to be a huge part of that. But I think just looking at AI as an overall to answer where this technology is going to go is a very broad answer. So I like to break that down a little bit into which technologies are we going to use and where. And so when we get into something like litigation, I would be very cautious using AI to do research for us, research that we can't verify independently and quickly as a human to make sure that we know exactly where it came from and we know how the AI got to that answer. And I'll say that is different from using an AI for an extraction capability or a write-up capability where we can see the information that's coming into that AI and we can track how it got to its extracted values. We can see exactly where it went with it. So I think much like talking about using stepping stones into these more difficult appraisal practices, stepping into litigation and not diving in, we want to look at technology kind of the same way. So as we're stepping into a litigation or a very difficult type of appraisal practice, let's use it sparingly and let's really understand what it is doing and how it's doing it. And that might be a little bit different from doing bank work where I'm going to I'm going to let it do some more research for me. I'm still going to understand exactly where those answers came from, but I don't need quite the depth that I need in litigation.
Appreciate that context. All right, we're going to be moving on to the next question here. So there's a lot of conversation about the appraiser capacity problem, or at least there is when the market is particularly hot. Not enough credentialed people, long turnaround times, geographic gaps in coverage. Is that a real constraint right now, or has the volume slowdown temporarily masked that? We'll go ahead and start with Jacinto on this one.
So appraiser capacity is that one's a tough one. I mean, I think finding, you know, people who, well, the biggest thing is finding, the next generation of appraiser, in my opinion. I think we all have to do our part there. And that's one of the reasons why I like teaching at the university. I can help, connect people who are coming into the profession, students who wanting to become appraisers, with people in the appraisal space. So, I'm a walking case study for what Rodman's committees are working on fixing. I've earned my appraisal license before I earned my college degree. I think Walt had mentioned that. I got out of the Navy, got a license, built a practice. The degree came later, and then advanced degrees came much later, and now I'm working on finishing a doctorate. So I think we have to look at some of uh, the potential barriers to entry as far as bringing new people into this profession, because I know that there's a lot of back and forth about whether a college degree should be required. But if that were in place when I started, I wouldn't be here today. So I think personally that we leave that part up, and I know we'll talk a bit about that, but I think we leave that up to the person who's hiring. I think we need to look at ways to incentivize uh, existing firms to take on new people, because the hardest thing is, as I can tell you right now, we have at any given time, I think in our firm, we might have 4 to 6 trainees who are working towards earning their certified general license. And even when I was on the banking side, I worked for a bank that did this better than any other organization out there. They matriculated 30 trainees across the program's initial start in 2007 to when I left in 2022. They had matriculated 30 trainees. So I've worked in programs that have done this very well. It's just about having the bandwidth as an appraiser, and the volume to be able to support having trainees come through your doors, because I think there are a lot of appraisers who want to do it, but just don't have the time. I see it in our own firm, that sometimes we feel like, oh gosh, I wish I would have spent a little more time with this person or that person. And it takes us a little longer to get them down the road because of again, bandwidth.
Yeah, that makes great sense. Walter, from your perspective, and someone that is ordering the appraisals, are you having capacity issues, turn times?
Being in the Northeast corridor, like right in the middle of it, being in the Philadelphia market, we're pretty blessed. We do have a talented group of appraisers within our immediate region. However, we do sometimes find difficulty when we need to look outside of our footprint or when we need to find something that's a little bit more specialized. I know that a majority of certified appraisers out there are certified residential appraisers, and I always focus on the fact that certified general appraisers are licensed to do residential as well. So basically, every appraiser has the licensure to do residential. But we find ourselves as an institution, and I've seen this at a couple other lenders where the scope of some of the residential lending that we're doing is expanding. Where with increased land values, increased construction costs, we're seeing more loans on higher end custom built homes than we have in the past. Uh, we've come to the realization that a lot of appraisers on our approved vendors list may have been taught how to appraise properties to a certain standard, which would be a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac form to, they learn how to fill out the form, but, when we ask them to elaborate on a cost approach, they kind of explain it the way they would explain it in a box this big on page 3 of a 1004 form. What we're finding out now is, using our ability to form relationships with appraisers. We're finding those that take their career to the next level and want to be able to handle some of the assignments that not everybody can. And I also think that that's something that hopefully the new 3.6 UAD platform is going to help. Is going to help with, because it's going to make the appraisers think through the process a little bit more as opposed to just filling out the form.
What about you, Rodman? What's your capacity issue?
Well, I mean, when you're talking about capacity, it's always you're always in need of really good appraisers. Again, the key being really good appraisers, right? People who really care about what they're doing, they're knowledgeable, they understand, they want to be a part of a team, they want to build something, they want to be a little bit better in what they have chosen to do in their life. And you talk about just where we're at in terms of bringing people into the marketplace, bringing in new appraisers, basically. And yeah, the AQB right now is looking at a lot of different ways on trying to not reduce the standards, but reduce the barriers, right? There's a big difference between eroding the public trust just to get people into the profession. I'd rather focus on making sure that we're building the public trust, that we're getting really good people in. And like Jay was talking about the college degree requirement. I mean, for gosh sakes, a lot of the feedback that we got was, hey, if they go get their college education, they're showing that they could finish something. And quite honestly, it's like, tell me that Marine didn't go finish something. Go tell me that person who's gone through all these different things in their life, it doesn't have to be a college degree. It's just because I went and got a philosophy class taken doesn't mean I'm going to be able to come in and be a really good appraiser. So the whole thing about what we really need to be doing right now, especially with technology coming in, we need to be right sizing. We need to make sure, yes, that we are maintaining this balance between being able to provide what we need to provide for our clients, for our banks, for our financial institutions. We need to have the capacity, because otherwise they'll go find a different place to get it, right? If we cannot help them get what they need, they're going to have to go look for an alternative. And we don't want that. But we don't want to overdo it either. So, for me, when I'm always pushing, for an example, like we're talking about the college degree and some of these other things going away, what are we replacing that with? Well, we're replacing that with more appraisal specific classes that they're going to have to add on, that they're going to have to take. Those are the people that I want working for my firm, right? So when we're talking about the whole grand scheme of things, are we at a deficit? I'd say right now we're not at a deficit. Is it good that we're looking at solidifying how we're going to move forward and bringing people in? I think that's great. But the other thing I'm going to tell everybody on this webinar, train your competition. Go out and train your competition, because you know what? Those people, you're going to get great value from those folks. And if at some point they want to move on and do something else, guess what? They're going to be sitting in that review seat. Guess what? They're going to be sitting as a client somewhere else. So take care of people, train them to be the best in this profession. That's how we're going to always build public trust. And that's how we're going to make sure that all these institutions that need appraisal work want us and need us.
Man, I cannot think of a better way to end that question. That was really powerful. Thank you so much, Rodman. All right. So every conversation in this industry right now touches on AI and technology. Where do each of you actually land, and what does that look like inside your own organizations? And I'm going to start out with the technology expert, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. Yes, I definitely embrace AI and I use it daily and extensively. But when we talk about AI, again, and I mentioned this before, I think that's a really big term that we throw around. Are you using AI to create your appraisals? That's a huge question, and it has a lot of nuance within it. So to be a little more specific, I try to break it down into these buckets again. So what is AI good at? What are some true skills that it can really handle for us? Something like extraction. AI and many of the models specifically were built specifically for extraction. They're great at it. So they really let us save a lot of time by putting in PDFs and unstructured data and making that information structured for us and databasing it for us. So that's a huge win for us. On the flip side to that, research, I trust a little bit less with AI. So I think it's really easy to throw a general query in there and say, hey, go write up the market analysis for me around X type of property in X location. That can get you a really good starting point, but it's hard, again, to go back and verify exactly what facts went into that, what sources were used, and how the AI wrote it up. There's ways to manipulate that, of course, and make it more reliable. But that's one that I always just use a lot of caution on. I want to be able to confirm exactly what this AI did for me. Writing, I think it can be a great writing partner for you, especially if you can get it started or you can tell it how you want to write. If you can give it a template, feed in some information to it, feed in some known data and have it write for you, that's a wonderful use of AI. And then review. I think we hear all the time about using AI to review for us. It's getting better and better. As context windows expand for the LLMs, that's a great use to catch your mistakes, but also to point out some deficiencies in the report. But then to go a little deeper too, I think beyond those buckets, let's also ask which model you're using. These things are changing data or week to week and sometimes even day to day from the major providers. Cost comes in as a question. So you want to right size the model to your process and what you're trying to get out of it. You don't want to use the most expensive model in the market or the slowest model in the market to answer quick questions. You want to make sure that you right size that. And then Grant, I want to just actually go back to your last question a little bit about capacity, because from a technology standpoint, I think capacity expands in a large way due to the technology that we have available. And AI is going to help us expand capacity. But with that comes the risk that everyone else on this panel just mentioned about mentorship and deep learning around appraisal. Let's not use AI as a crutch, okay? Especially when people are learning how to appraise. We need people to come in the industry still and have a deep understanding of how valuation works and how complicated valuation works. And you don't get that by asking an AI, write up the highest and best use for me on this property using these facts. That's not going to be the way that we learn. That's not the way that the industry thrives. So I think that's the big risk to it, even though there's massive upside right now within technology.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hey, Scott, I got a question for you. I've personally sat on numerous meetings with you discussing AI and how the various teams are using it. What sort of successes and failures are you finding so far?
Well, Grant, going back, gosh, probably not even a year ago, I know I was a bit closed off to AI, and I was a little bit of the bah humbug mindset, which I know is pretty unpopular these days as we've all quickly kind of gotten these AI tools in our hands and see what they can do. I've pivoted around quite a bit personally. I use AI quite a bit in formulating letters and communications, both inside and outside the office. Um, I find that the language abilities and the ability to articulate is really powerful, and oftentimes just kind of lets you spit out the generalities of what you want to say, and then it gives it back to you in a very polished, professional format that you can turn around and send to somebody, and that's a really powerful tool. Um, in terms of how we're using AI in our appraisals that we're completing, that's a question that is more answered at the operational level by my team. And what I spend my time more doing is figuring out what they're using and making sure that I'm comfortable with them using that. I kind of see myself as a bit of a circuit breaker between the AI capabilities and what we're going to provide to our clients. I think appraisers generally are motivated to get through work. They've got a lot of work to do. And, they're maybe not thinking about all the time thinking through, well, if I put this information on this AI, platform, might it be exposed or something like that? So a lot of the things that I'm trying to do for my team is kind of perform that safety check in the background. Like, what are we going to use? What are the tools that are optimal that get us the results we need, but also provide the security that we want to provide to our clients and can do that in a cost effective way. And, there's a lot of amazing tools out there right now. From what I understand, a lot of them will promise, security, but that is kind of like you've got to read the fine print and the fine print on the fine print to only find out, well, it's more secure than our free model, but it's not as secure as our enterprise model. So there's so much going on out there right now. It's moving so quickly, but our group is definitely using AI more and more every day. I think in the writing aspect, it's definitely getting used quite a bit in terms of just editing the verbiage in our documents. I think also maybe Patrick mentioned, analyzing data that we have, like raw data. I think it's very useful in that regard. And again, my role is just trying to kind of be a circuit breaker and make sure we don't step on a live wire anywhere in the process.
That makes great sense. Any other concise remarks? We still have a couple of questions to get through and Q&A. Anything else to add? All right. So we're gonna start out with Rodman on this. So Rodman, the profession has been under some real scrutiny over the last several years. Workforce questions, public trust concerns, regulatory pressure. From where you sit today, is the profession in a better place, a worse place, or a different place? Feel free to specify the time frame.
Yeah, and I mean, you could talk about being under scrutiny, and it's not so much even the last 2 years. I mean, we're always under scrutiny. And there's valid reasons why we should be under scrutiny because, people, the public relies on us to provide a service that is so essential and so big. I mean, these are huge, huge decisions that people are making. And guess what? We're kind of that referee to go in and really look at, make sure that our values that we're providing are correct, not high, not low, not what somebody wants to see, but correct, right? So there has been a lot of scrutiny, and everything changes in politics too. A lot of stuff. We went through a big period of time where politically we are getting scrutinized pretty heavily on Capitol Hill. They're coming in, looking at a lot of what was happening, look at a lot of things were happening, primarily with the single family residential space, but a lot of that still trickles over to the commercial space too. People don't think that that's going to happen, but it certainly does. So we went from an administration that was had one set of philosophies, and then we swung way over to the left to an administration that had a whole nother set of philosophies. Now, looking at all the stuff that's coming out right now, we swung way back right, and they're eliminating all the ones that had just come out from the previous administration. So, in terms of where we're at right now, though, I mean, this is an exciting time to be an appraiser. I've done this since 1998. I've always loved being in this profession. But there's something going on right now that just excites me about where we're headed as a profession. And I don't know if that's the technology that we're doing and bringing on board, the tools that we have in our tool belt. I mean, for criminy's sakes, Grant, I used to, I didn't even have a digital camera when I started. I used to go to the 1 hour photo and get 4 photos. It took me a half a day just to tape those things to a report, right? And then that first camera came out, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, it was this big. But we could go out and we could get digital photos, and then I don't have to scrape those little arrows off anymore onto a map. And there's just so many cool things that have happened in this big transition. So these struggles that we talk about as an appraiser, there's always the different struggles. There's always the different things happening, whether that's political, whether that's with technology. But it's the people. The first word that you asked about was evolving, right? What are we doing? And we are always evolving. But I'm going to tell you this right now. We're evolving more right now than ever. And we have to. Why? Because technology is evolving like it's never evolved in the history that I've been an appraiser. I mean, to keep up with what we need to do right now to keep up with technology is going to be a chore in itself because it's moving so darn quickly. What we know now is going to be different in 5 months, let alone 5 years. So, in general, I guess, if I'm thinking about the things that are happening overall, we're in a really good place right now. I think we're in a really good place. We've got incredible technology. Even things with what you guys do with Valcre. It's kind of like, I don't understand why people are still just using Word and Excel docs and doing their work in there instead of having a platform where you've got 60 people sitting there in a technology lab figuring out how you can do it better. I didn't have that. We were trying to figure it out in-house. So we've got the tool belt right now that is full. It's filled to the max. And, with everything that is changing, I hope people see that this is an opportunity, a big opportunity, but for the best appraisers, because there's going to be a whole series of appraisers, like Patrick was talking about earlier, that are going to be doing work in ChatGPT, not knowing the valuation fundamentals behind what they're doing. And so those are the people who are going to do really, really well right now, Grant. Those are the people that are going to excel. They're going to make a lot of money doing what they're doing. They're going to be sought after. And it's just incredible opportunity all the way around.
Jacinto, do you agree with everything Rodman has to say here?
What Rodman said. No, I think that I think Rodman is spot on there. I mean, I'd say if you're asking like where we're at, I'd say a different place, a more demanding place, and for the professionals who rise to it, a genuinely better one. I've always told my students, have always asked, "Hey, are you worried about technology replacing you?" And I was telling them, no, technology can replace every job. It's those who embrace that technology and apply it to their profession are the ones who are going to rise to the top. As Rodman said earlier when we were talking about capacity, we don't have a we don't have a capacity problem. We have a competency problem. We need competent, talented individuals out there who know what to do with the technology. I mean, people are so worried right now about AI that they don't even realize that they have been using AI. I mean, everywhere I look, there's a new webinar about something, whether it's with CCIM. This morning, we had a great Valcre webinar about the AI import feature. This Thursday, the Northern California chapter of the Appraisal Institute is having a fantastic seminar, a webinar about the use of AI and other things around underwriting and things like that. Appraisers need to be attending those. I mean, we're doing another, Eric Schneider and I are having a in-person AI practical applications of AI in real estate for the counselors of real estate and the San Diego chapter of the Appraisal Institute. So there's a lot going on because people don't understand that they're already and they have been using AI. There's the more conventional types of AI with Google Maps and Excel. Then you have the generative AI that we've seen, and now agentic, artificial intelligence. And those are some of the things we're going to be talking about on Thursday. So what hasn't changed is our underlying obligation to public trust, but what has changed is the scrutiny that we're under. We want to make sure that we have at least a baseline understanding. I think Patrick said something about not letting it make the judgment for you. You want to have a baseline understanding of what questions you're asking. At the CLE conference this year, which is the continuing legal education, we talked about AI, and I think Eric Schneider gave the presentation. He was talking about, how AI can get it wrong. So you have to understand. He inserted some tax appeal code, and that he knew was in there for a fact, and he asked about it, and it did not highlight that specific provision, and then he said, well, what about this? And it said, oh, you're right. Oftentimes it'll come back with questions like that. So when we're talking about the use of AI and how it's impacting our business, I think it's going to take the people who want to be good appraisers, who want to provide credible evaluations, who want to serve the public trust and make them better. Because elevation only counts. Elevation only counts really if we claim it out loud. Which is, I think Walt said something when I watched the recorded video earlier about elevating, your appraisers. Weak work has never been more discoverable than it is today, and strong judgment has never been more valuable for us as appraisers. So if we stay invisible, we let others define us. We don't want to become a profession that's defined by others. I think we want to stay a profession that stays true to our original finding or original origins about public trust.
Exactly.
Walter, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, just I think that what Hasita was talking about, what everybody was talking about, was dead on. I'm one of the ones who have had the blessing of being a fee appraiser for close to 2 decades, and then also have an external viewpoint as well, being on the banking side. And when you ask me where we are as a profession, are we in a better place, a worse place, or a different place? I would say, we're in a different place. And the internal perspective and the external perspective may still be a little different. As appraisers, I love the idea that we're getting a bunch of us together and we're having these conversations, and we have some great panelists here and we got some great attendees. I scrolled through the attendee list when I wasn't talking, and I was so impressed with everybody who's on the call today. But a lot of times it's like we're preaching to the choir, because we've all met each other before. We've all been in the same groups, and we've all, talked about the future of the profession. You go on some social media outlets, and a lot of the people that are talking about appraisal issues aren't appraisers. They're brokers. They're mortgage people. They're people outside the business that has their opinion on what the appraisal profession is, but they don't necessarily know everything that we know. So in order to kind of, work on cultivating a little bit higher level of public trust, it's really important that we get people that, like Rodman, every time I turn on LinkedIn, he's there talking about something. I love it. I'm like, we need more appraisers to step up and actually have a voice to speak firsthand about our profession, as opposed to letting other people outside our profession talk about us and what we do.
It sounds like a call to action.
Absolutely.
Patrick or Scott, anything else to contribute here?
I think those answers have been terrific from everyone else. I mean, I think the only thing I would really add to the state of the profession right now with technology is I think it allows us to focus on the things that we like about appraising. So technology is allowing us to remove a little bit more of the busy work from our schedules, and to remove maybe some of the review and catching of errors. And it lets us really focus on valuation, what drives that value. So I think that makes this an exciting time to be an appraiser.
Yeah, and Grant, I'll just finish up with I think one area that I do like the direction we're headed, several, but the reduction or the elimination of the college degree for the Cert Gen. I mean, how many of us know people that are in some profession that have no degree, or have a degree that's in some completely different area? And I, for one, know several really talented appraisers who have been held back by this requirement. Kind of difficult to get out and start your life and have a wife and kids and say, oh, now I got to go back and get a college degree while I'm trying to juggle work and everything else. And that's been an unfair, restraint on some really talented people. And I think that's going to be, this is going to be a great opportunity to pull those shackles off a few of these people. And as Rodman was saying, they're bringing in other educational criteria. Having taken underwater basket weaving and gotten a college degree doesn't make you a better appraiser. So I think that's an area where I'm really kind of bringing back part of the old conversation we had. I'm happy to see things going in that direction.
So well put, Scott. All right, so we're going to move into our last question, and this is going to be a more of a rapid fire. So keep your answers to maybe 30 or 40 seconds, please. Uh, hmm. If you had to name the single biggest threat to the appraisal profession and its relevance over the next 5 years, not just a headwind, but an existential crisis, what would that be? And we are going to kick that off with Patrick.
I'm going to go with training. I think I've hit on it, and a lot of us have throughout this call, which is um, AI is out there. It is impacting workflows. It is impacting the understanding of the profession. That added to work from home, which really became prominent in COVID and has not really returned to an office, I think has reduced the interaction between new appraisers and mentors. And that to me is a real threat to the industry. If we lose that deep understanding of valuation and what drives valuation by not having people train and really thoroughly understand the profession, I think that's an existential threat to where we are.
Rodman, how about you?
100% with what Patrick said. I mean, AI is a blessing. There are so many good things about AI. It's going to be a gift. It's going to be a tool, but it's also our biggest threat. I think that we need to understand valuation methodology. And the folks that are coming in, if we have new people coming into the profession and we're just training people to run the AI models without really understanding what's happening when you're pulling those levers, when you're actually doing the valuation, I think that's going to be the biggest threat to our industry, because what we're going to do is we're going to produce a lot of people who are going to erode the public trust, because they might get that valuation done, but they might not understand the fundamentals behind it. They might not even understand how they got to the values. So for me, I look at it and go, you know what, it's going to be incredible, but it's going to be incredible if it's used properly. And that's making sure that what we're doing is training people correctly so they understand the methodology, and then they understand that the AI is a tool. The tool is not the methodology. You've got the methodology, you've got the tool. And if you can put those two things together, I think you're going to have incredible people doing our jobs. If we don't, I think we're going to have a lot of big problems in the future.
Scott, let's move over to you for this one.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, training is very important, so I won't go any further on that one. But the another, side to that equation is going to be not only knowing how to use these products, but what it is that they're doing. So if somebody just says, what's it worth, and it spits out an incredibly articulate appraisal, and you hand it to someone else as an appraiser and say, here you go, here's your appraisal, but you can't explain how the AI or whatever tools that you use did to generate that product, you're in a very dangerous position existentially for yourself and your business going forward. I mean, I can remember years ago when I was running cash flows day in and day out, and we would have somebody new come into the office and we'd kind of piddle around with the cash flow. And they'd eventually walk down to my office and say, what number do you put here to get the value? And they'd be talking about something like, oh, the discount rate or something like that. And it was just, there wasn't a fundamental understanding of, they were just entering numbers into a spreadsheet and waiting for an output to come. We don't want to get there as an industry. We need to understand what these models are doing, and so that we can understand and explain the output when it's created.
Let's go with Walter next before Jacinto cleans it up.
Yeah. Thanks, Grant. To bring this full circle, in the beginning of in the beginning of the presentation, you asked me to talk about one word. That word was, for me, was transitional. And I think that the biggest threat is appraisers doing things the way they're doing it because that's the way it's always been done, and not taking advantage of the opportunity that's ahead of them. The role of the real estate appraiser is going to change. It's going to be those, and we talked about this today, that are going to be able to adapt new technology in order to redefine what their purpose within the real estate profession is. From the banking side, for us right now, it is all about getting as much information as we can to make a prudent lending decision. And a lot of that is coming in the form of data. Data has been trapped in the appraisal reports for generations. Now with this new technology, we can pull this data out, we can aggregate it, and we can present that in a way where the information that's being presented by the appraiser is more important now. And in the next 5 years, it's going to be more important than it has ever been in the history of our profession. And those individuals that can, you know, that can provide us, that information in a concise format are going to be the ones where we realize that the use of an appraisal is no longer going to be the last hurdle we need to cross in order to get to the finish line for a loan. It's actually going to be something that's going to be ordered in the beginning of the process. It's going to be used as part of our risk assessment. The data is going to be used in part of our loan review. It's going to be used for the next loan that we give. So the appraisers that can really adapt to the technology can be able to provide that data in a way that the banks can use it better. We're not replacing the appraiser. That appraiser is going to wind up being more important to those clients that are able to utilize that information.
Yeah, and I just building on what all of these great thinkers before me here said. You know, Walt talked about data, and I think with the democratization of data and the implementation of AI, it's given us access to more information than we've ever had before. The word I used at the beginning was reinventing, and it's kind of an inside joke. Me and my old boss at one of the banks used to joke like every commercial you see today, it's just a pair of socks, but they say we're reinventing the way you wear socks. We're reinventing the way you use a wallet. We're reinventing. Well, it's finally caught up to appraisal, and again, with the democratization of data and AI, what you've heard people also talk about is, appraisal becoming a commodity. And we can't let this wave of technology and data commoditize this. What we can let it do is commoditize the repeatable portions, but the things like unusual property rights, thin evidence on a litigation case, conflicting assumptions, highest and best use, damages, feasibility, reconciliation. Those are all things where judgment becomes more valuable, not less. So the commoditization risk isn't the work, it's the appraisers positioning themselves as report producers instead of the judgment that is behind the report.
Well, thank you so much for the very informative discussion today. We're at time, and sorry to the audience for not having an ability to answer questions. Before we let everyone go, just wanted to thank our panelists and everybody for joining us today. It was such an awesome discussion. The recording will be in your inbox shortly. And we would really appreciate it if you took the couple minutes of feedback that we'll offer to help shape some of our next sessions. Finally, session 2 will be focusing on the lender's perspective. More details to come on that soon. And thank you once again to everyone and our panelists.